that's where I come back to my concern with seeing numbers like this and the degradation of confidence in the university, but also the degradation of confidence in scientists. Be careful that you are not inherently going in a political direction, because you will be pushing people away who have a very different viewpoint from you on the issue if the communication is that we all, even though that's not true, we all agree on this particular topic, or these particular topics, many of them. One of the things that's always been on my mind is the relationship of the public to scientists as their professions, not necessarily to science the process, but to scientists, and how much trust there is and confidence there is in the public, of the public in scientists. And because universities are where we train the next generation of scientists, the universities, and higher education. So that's where I wanted to go off with this, and why I'm talking about this particular note that just came up from Gallup, in that Americans' confidence in higher education is down sharply. Now, of course, this is one poll, take it for what you will for that, but to just leap off and have that discussion, because it's not the only one that suggests this, though it is certainly one in this case that we're looking at. And so I want to bring that up, but I also want to link it to other things that are going on, because there's a bit of a theme here. If you harken back to the Nature Human Behavior article, whereby it was made evident in the study that Nature's decision to endorse then candidate Joe Biden for president in 2020 backfired somewhat spectacularly. In that it did nothing to affect the election, but it sure as heck affected the perception of nature and the perception of scientists largely, although to a much lesser degree, as I noted back at the time. But that is why I'm concerned about this. Why? Because let us think for a moment of all the really great things that have come available in society because of the scientific process, because of scientists and what have you. Think of the treatments for cancer. Think of the going to the moon. Think of all the things we know in terms of adaptation and engineering, and being able to grow and develop society, and at the same time still be able to take care of the environment. It's not so utterly destructive as a la clear cutting or something like that. There's been a lot of these innovations that have resulted from the scientific process that have allowed for such tremendous growth and prosperity in society. But a lot of that only comes if there's confidence in that process and confidence in those who engage in it. Because, of course, it's up to society writ large to whether or not they make use of those innovations or find them useful. And also, society writ large may look at a scientific question and be like, well, that's not useful for us, or it is useful, and then make use of the resulting information and knowledge that is generated as the result of scientific research. And again, a lot of that research is done at higher education institutions, at universities. A lot of that research is done also elsewhere, but I think most folks do think of the university when they think of scientific research. They don't necessarily immediately think of government labs, but I could be wrong on that. That's fair. Here's the interesting part with that, of course, is that, yes, scientists need to remember that there's more than one thing that goes into making a decision happen, and it's certainly not just scientific evidence. You have competing objectives and needs and wants and what have you that you have to balance with these kinds of things. So as much as science may say X is going to happen if you do this, not science per se, but studies may say, that doesn't mean that's going to be the decision taken, nor necessarily should it be. Because, as we said, science is somewhat myopic and looking at the results of a particular action and ignoring others, perhaps, or being just focused on answering a physical question, for example. But it still matters because if there's no confidence in some of these institutions, I'm not saying I disagree. I'm not saying there should be a huge amount of confidence. There's distinctly some problems that I have with higher education and universities and what have you, and I'm going to get into that. Don't get me wrong. But I do worry for what does it mean when you have a lack of trust in certain institutions, Western institutions particularly, or more precisely, liberal Enlightenment institutions that have led to tremendous amounts of innovation and actual progress. And I want to connect it with a few things because, of course, there's a question of why that comes up in this too. So let's get into that. Story highlights 36% have a great deal or quite a lot of confidence in higher education. Confidence is down 48% from 48% in 2018 and 57% in 2015. All major subgroups less confident, Republicans dropping the most. Self-identified Republicans, that probably would be. Americans' confidence in higher education has fallen to 36%, sharply lower than two prior readings in 2015 and 2018. In addition to the 17% of adults who have a great deal of confidence, or 19% have quite a lot of confidence, 40% have some, and 22% have very little. So I want to make a note on this because this is the annoying part with any of these kinds of surveys. There is a framing thing that's going on there. That 30%, that's 36% confidence in higher education. That is specifically quite a lot or a great deal. That is not just confidence in general. Because you notice the sum bar is quite large. So there's some confidence, but not a whole lot. So what the headline really should read here is the amount of people who have a great deal of confidence or have really high confidence in higher education has fallen off very dramatically. That is the correct headline. Some of it shifting into some category, some of it shifting into the very little category, which you can see from the graphic there, so I'm not going to belabor that. The latest decline in the public's trust in higher education is from a June 1st to 22nd Gallup poll that also found confidence in 16 other institutions has been waning in recent years. Many of these entities, which attract more often than higher education, are now also at their near their lowest points of confidence. Although diminished, higher education ranks fourth in confidence among 17 institutions measured with small business, the military, and the police in the top 3 spots. This was also the case in 2018, last time higher education was included in the list of institutions. I'm actually going to pull that up while I'm thinking about it. Yeah, there you go. There you go. That would be the little thing there. You don't have scientists listed by... One of the reasons for pulling it up and think about it with higher ed is, unfortunately, I don't think Gallup includes just scientists or other things in there that that probably need to get included. Great deal, fair. Oh, yeah. Percentage, a great deal, and fair amount of confidence. Okay. Congress, all the way down at the bottom, don't you know? But, let's continue here. In 2015, majorities of Americans in all key subgroups expressed confidence in higher education. Again, what they're saying by expressed confidence is a lot or a great deal, I think. Yeah, quite a lot or a great deal. It's not necessarily just, I'm just confident. It's a specific level of confidence, so just bear that in mind. With one exception, independence, 48%. By 2018, though, confidence had fallen across all groups, with the largest drop, 17 percentage points, among Republicans. In the latest measure, confidence once again fell across the board, but Republicans sank the most, 20 points to 19%, the lowest of any group. Confidence among adults without a college degree and those aged 55 and older dropped nearly as much as Republicans since 2018. So, it's doing it by party affiliation, education, and and men, women, and age in here that you can see where things have dropped off pretty spectacularly. Even amongst those with postgraduate degrees, which postgraduate degree would be master's, PhD, law degree, medical degree, those kinds of things, those very high level degrees, let's put it that way. Even though all subgroups show declining confidence in higher education, significant gaps persist among political, educational, gender, and age subgroups. Notably, the only key subgroup with a major level of confidence in higher education is Democrats. I'm going to get into that in a moment because this is where I get concerned. Americans' confidence in higher education, which showed a marked decrease between 2015 and 2018, has declined further to a new low point. While Gallup did not probe the reasons behind the drop in confidence, the rising costs of post-secondary education likely play a significant role. Yes and no. I'm going to get into that. There is a growing divide between Republicans and Democrats in higher education. Previous polling found that Democrats expressed concern about the costs, while Republicans registered concern about politics in higher education. There is the thing. There is the thing right there. It's been pretty well known for a while now that there's been a marked drop-off in viewpoint diversity amongst the faculty of many universities, and particularly in the social sciences disciplines. So that's part of it. But of course, I want to remind you guys, of course, of the other notable drop-off has just been of scientists generally in here, and this comes from the Pew poll from last year. But this particular note here is actually why I want to talk about it, is because remember what I said at the beginning with the Nature Human Behavior article and the like here, in that when institutions themselves start getting into making political statements about things, of course you are going to alienate people who, well, it would seem anyway, you're going to alienate people of a different view. And a different political persuasion. And that's actually where I want to get into this and use this as an example. This comes from Heterodox Academy's blog here. It was published yesterday. The university cannot and should not speak on behalf of its students and professors about the affirmative action ruling. And so they put out a call for opinion pieces related to the Supreme Court's ruling on ending affirmative action. And so we'll get into this, and I'm going to use this as a jumping off point to illustrate what they are talking about here and why I share the concern that the reason for such a huge drop off is a lot because different institutions decided they were going to play politics and support and ignore those folks who have different viewpoints from themselves. In which case, institutional neutrality would be better, because you wouldn't be saying you wouldn't be putting out there that you are perhaps completely against values shared by others. But anyway, you would also be, well, the reason this opinion came about is because the guy, as we'll get into, the author of this piece, as we'll get into, was pretty annoyed seeing a lot of different institutions that he's apparently part of making statements about the ruling that probably didn't line up with his own. Over the past few days, I have received several statements from my university in response to the Supreme Court's decision on affirmative action, from the university president to campus associations claiming to speak on behalf of students and the campus community. These emails begin with messages such as, "We are greatly disappointed and we are disheartened." While I have no problem with individuals voicing their opinion on these matters, and indeed welcome their perspective, I challenge the implication that these viewpoints represent the university and its community at large. We, as the students and educators of the university, are not a monolith and did not elect these members to speak for us. Yes, this is actually quite to the point of what I was trying to say, because when it's put out there from the professional societies, the professional institutions that we are for this, you're inadvertently representing all your members, and a lot of the people who are in that discipline. You're inadvertently representing all the folks at the university, even though you probably have a very, very diverse set of opinions. If you're pretty much saying, something that you're disappointed by this, and we wanted to continue doing something that a significant portion of the population did look at as very bad, and still do look at as very bad, you wouldn't be surprised necessarily that the confidence in that institution goes down amongst that particular group. That's what I'm getting at with this, is that, yeah, individuals all have their viewpoints and perspectives, and actually, I would really love to see that. Diversity of viewpoint is awesome. It's fun to have. But it's not good when it's basically coming from the university that we all share this viewpoint, when that's not true. And that can actually, I think, be very damaging to the public confidence in universities, but also to public confidence in scientists when scientific organizations get into that. And I have a note to make on that point in a second. In the wake of the Supreme Court's ruling on affirmative action in college admissions, we must remember that university administrators and others on campus in positions of authority should not speak as if their personal statements represent the consensus of those within the university. I would have less of a problem with such statement if they represented an honest effort to poll or otherwise quantify the prevailing sentiment of those at the university. I might be able to say that too. You can say, like, yeah, in general, a lot of us here support this or don't support this. Anyway. However, even if most respondents agreed with a certain view, does this really give an individual the authority to say this view somehow represents the university as a whole? Correct answer, no. I challenge the notion that an institution or university can offer or provide a singular viewpoint on a complicated and nuanced issue like the legality of affirmative action or anything similar. To claim the university offers such a view implies that it has a will that goes beyond and can even override the plurality of voices within. The Calvin Report from the Chicago Principles states in one point that I'm probably going to butcher it exactly, and so I'm caveat that I may say this wrong. That the university should be the home and sponsor of critics, but it should not itself be the critic. That's what we're getting at here. That's maintaining institutional neutrality when you're having your institution the many different voices and perspectives, some of which may be very critical, some of which may not be, and that is kind of the thing that matters there, and that is actually what helps to maintain some distinct amount of confidence in university institutions and in scientific organizations. The very idea that the university itself could, in principle, take a stand on political matters seems to me misguided. It erases the views of those who may disagree or dissent and implies accord where none may exist. I'd argue that the purpose of the university and the guiding telos behind practices such as tenure is to welcome and protect diverse and minority viewpoints, not to speak over them. It is ironic that advancing a specific viewpoint in the name of diversity may itself obscure diverse views, some of which involves the nature of diversity itself. DEI statements, see that. I do not question the intentions of those who make these statements. Instead, I question the precedent such statements set and whether our students are encouraged to healthily disagree with them. I am concerned that those in positions of power at my university and others are overstepping their boundaries, unaware of the effect this has on the intellectual climate on campus. And that's where I would go further. That it probably also has an effect on things like this. Not just this, because this is recent, but things like this, where universities take statements on this, statements on that, statements on what have you, on political related issues when they probably shouldn't. That does have an influence on the confidence that folks have in higher education. That's the reason I don't like these kinds of statements, because if it screws the confidence in higher education, it's also probably going to screw the confidence in scientists, because so many scientists are at institutions of higher education. Not entirely because there's going to be some complex relationships in there, probably, but just a note. Since there is no public consensus on affirmative action, why should we expect consensus from within the university, which is made up of members from the public? This isn't limited to affirmative action either. On any issue where there is disagreement, we should expect a plurality of views. We come to a greater place of empathy and understanding by listening to these different views, not speaking over them or pretending they do not exist. What unites me with my fellow faculty and students is not the extent to which we agree with each other, but the extent to which we disagree. I see such disagreement as an invitation to learn of a problem to be solved. By ignoring or downplaying disagreements, administrators arguably treat healthy dissent as problematic instead of the academic process running its course. My suggestion is thus for administrators to continue to voice their opinions, but state that they are speaking for themselves and not for the university and its members at large. As a courtesy, I would appreciate if they acknowledge that their colleagues, faculty, and students may disagree with them, and that such disagreement is not only okay, but welcomed, especially on a university campus. While I understand that administrators need to make decisions on behalf of what they think is best for the university, I would argue that speaking in its place is not one of them. Those in positions of authority would do well to remember that their job is to represent us, not speak for or over us. When someone claims the university speaks one way or another on a topic, my response is, it certainly doesn't speak for me. My fellow students, faculty, and I are more than capable of speaking for ourselves. So this person's a student. Awesome. And to that line, I very much agree. I speak for myself, and particularly on this channel. I speak very much for myself. I don't want somebody to speak for me. And this is not unique to just here with universities. This came up recently, I think it was actually just today when it came in, was from the American Mathematical Society, and it's a letter to the editor. Leaving the American Mathematical Society. In 2022, having been a member of the AMS for more than 30 years, I decided not to renew my membership for another year. Here are my reasons. With grave concern, I see the growing use of DEI statements as a required component for job applications, in particular in mathematical sciences. In my opinion, it has an enormous corrosive effect on the math community and education in this country. Even if one is required to say, I passionately believe that water would certainly wet us, as fire would certainly burn, the routine affirmation of one's beliefs as a precondition of making a living constitutes compelled speech and corrupts everyone who participates in the performance. I grew up in the Soviet Union, where people had to affirm their fealty to ideals, and the leaders embodying those ideals on a daily basis. As years went by, I observed the remarkable ease with which passionate communists turned first into passionate pro-Western liberals and then into passionate nationalists. This lived experience and also common sense convinced me that only true conformists excel in this game. Do we really want our math departments to be populated by conformists? Currently, the compelled speech of compulsory DEI statements affects mostly people at the beginning of their careers. That is when they are most vulnerable. The sheer logic of bureaucratic expansion suggests that those who position themselves as experts in evaluating the merits and judging the sincerity of DEI statements will find new venues to apply their skills, affecting other demographics. The AMS does nothing to investigate these developments. About 25 years ago, when one of the universities decided to close its PhD program in math, the AMS saw it urgent enough to dispatch a fact-finding mission. Now, as we have a social experiment on a national scale with potentially devastating consequences, the AMS demonstrates a remarkable lack of curiosity. I can think of several reasons for this detachment. First, it can be that the majority of members see nothing wrong with DEI statements or consider them a welcome development. I, for one, would be interested to find out if that is indeed the case. He's speaking to, right here with this particular note, he is speaking to the plurality of views within a professional society of scientists, in this case mathematicians, but you could put this out to any number of things, be it the American Association for the Advancement of Sciences, the American Medical Association, the American Pediatric Association, all of those kinds of groups. And this is the other thing. Professional societies who claim to speak on behalf of all scientists in their respective disciplines. But they don't acknowledge that there is actually one hell of a lot of plurality of views. Within their respective disciplines. And that is another thing that I think helps to reduce the confidence in sciences, is you are inherently showing that, you're inherently trying to tell people that all of these different disciplines share the same viewpoint when that is not true. And so where's the viewpoint diversity? That is one of the reasons why I think you're getting into political things, and therefore you start losing trust and confidence. A couple of years ago, several letters were circulated and published that painted an inconclusive, to say the least, picture. As far as I can tell, the discussion ended having barely started. Wouldn't it be useful to have it restarted now that we see more results of the DEI proliferation? Second, I anticipate an argument that the AMS is not involved with politics, but this is the kind of politics that, rephrasing Pericles, will get involved with you whether you like it or not, and hence inaction is just as political as action. In this case, perhaps so. You do have to maintain a certain degree of institutional neutrality. Third, people can simply be afraid to voice their opinions. Admittedly, the line between the second and third reasons is blurred. The fears of being accused of having certain pernicious attitudes and creating an unsafe environment, as well as the fear of losing one's livelihood, are not without merit. However, compared to the standards set by the totalitarian movements of the past, these repercussions may not seem like such a big deal. The more we are afraid to talk and act now, the more debilitating the fear becomes, and the more devastating will be the effect of our inaction. So, props to you, because I know you're leaving the American Mathematical Society. And that's where I come back to my concern with seeing numbers like this and the degradation of confidence in the university, but also the degradation of confidence in scientists. Be careful that you are not inherently going in a political direction, because you will be pushing people away who have a very different viewpoint from you on the issue if the communication is that we all, even though that's not true, we all agree on this particular topic, or these particular topics, many of them. That's the thing I'm concerned about, and that is why the politicization of higher education and of STEM needs to stop. And it is, it's not good when the right does it, but I think it's fair to say from the numbers that we have that a lot more of the faculty drift to the left, not to the right. Let me know what you think. Hit the like button on the way out the door, comment on the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel, all that lovely good jazz. Until next time, I'm Adrian. May you all stay curious.